This three-bean casserole is dumb.
Scooby-Doo-Bop-Biddy-Bop-Bop-Bop. I'm so sorry, babe. I hadn't tasted him yet.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Looking forward to, you know. Like,
Don't talk about the ingredients. I know. Yeah.
After, it's just a surprise for your mouth.
yeah.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time for another comic book review. Marvel has had some high-profile comic books, some relaunches coming out lately. None more so, in my opinion, than Hulk #1 from Donny Cates, Superstar Marvel Comics, Ryan Ottley, and Frank Martin on colors. I have been exceptionally excited for this comic book. I think that more often than not, Donny Cates delivers an exciting, interesting story. Don't always agree with his creative choices, and I'm going to talk about that here with this one. Ryan Ottley, I don't know that Spider-Man was really the right fit for him as an artist. You know, in theory, it should have worked. I don't think that was the Ryan Ottley we all wanted at Marvel. This is something that will probably fit his art style a little bit better, and Frank Martin is simply impeccable, so they have a phenomenal creative team on this. And when you look at the cover, it says, what if the Hulk exists to protect us from Banner? Obviously, insinuating that we are going on a different path with the Hulk, and this is going to be a characterization that we've never seen before. When I read something like that, I get very gun-shy. I get very hesitant of what the heck is Donny Cates trying to do here, because the Hulk as a character is a tragic figure. Bruce Banner is a tragic figure. He has this monster inside of him that he can't control. He wants to do good. He's a super genius that could, perhaps save the world if he was in control of his own faculties. But he has this weakness that he can't overcome despite being a good man. Deep on the inside, he's got this monster that's completely filled with rage and will destroy everything, essentially, it doesn't matter if you're a good guy or bad guy. If Hulk's on the loose, Hulk's going to be smashing some stuff. Once you make Bruce Banner no longer the focal, a character that's the tragic character, and now he's perhaps even more destructive than the Hulk itself. Are you writing a Hulk book? That's my question. I think a long-winded way to ask that. Is this even a Hulk book, the general premise for it? And if this is, obviously this could just be the first story arc, and then, get back to the regular version of Hulk. And there's certainly been different takes on the Hulk Banner relationship, or even the way Hulk operates kind of as a mechanism. But this definitely changes this on its head. And Donny Cates really likes to do that. You can see with what he did with Thor. You think of the Donald Blake story. What happened to Donald Blake after all these years? What if he's sitting, in this place and going insane and murdering everybody in this other world that he inhabits until Thor calls him back into action? What if he went insane while he was down there? Interesting take. Before that, obviously with Venom. What if he had a son? What if there's a symbiote god out there? And what if there was a weird kind of codependent relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock that they needed to kind of fix and stuff? So he's always tweaking things. He's never a status quo kind of guy. Donny Cates come on the title, especially now that he's Superstar Donny Cates. Before, especially like when he came on to Venom, he wasn't quite the Donny Cates that he is now, where he probably does have carte blanche to do whatever he wants. But if this was his pitch for the story, why not just pitch it to Image or Boom or Substack? Make a Hulk-like figure to where the really heinous one was actually the human part, and the character everyone thought was a monster was actually the only thing keeping the world safe from the human. Like it's a similar character, but it's not Hulk. Like he could have pitched this and probably been just as successful, or perhaps even more successful, and he would own the IP at that point at Image or Boom, or to do it on Substack. So that's my question. I definitely want to hear from you guys. If you've read this Hulk book, is it a Hulk book? I don't know that it is. I do recommend it. You know, I like the art well enough. It's not quite as great as I expected, but I do think it'll pick up and get better with time. It does look good, and it's definitely gruesome. But there's some things that I think Ryan Ottley could work on in this book. I like the writing. I generally speaking like the concept. I just don't think it's a Hulk book. But it's interesting. It's certainly different. If you wanted to change, if Immortal Hulk was not your Hulk book, you're not getting Immortal Hulk here. You're getting something very, very different. I just don't know that it's a Hulk book, but I do recommend it because it is interesting. I am such I'm a walking contradiction. I got a video that's going to be up this weekend talking about what era in comics are. You know, we've got the Silver Age, Bronze Age, all that kind of stuff. What is this age? I have a name for it, and I'm going to be talking about it. And this kind of falls into why I'm calling it that. And let's just say in that video, it's got a very negative connotation, but here I'm not being completely negative. I would recommend it because there are only so many well-executed comic books being put out from Marvel at DC at this time. This isn't the best, but it is something different, and it's worth your time, and it's I almost said readable as if that was a compliment, but hey, that's the comic book industry we're in at this time. So definitely want to hear from you guys. I think I'm going to be in the stark minority on this one. I think people are going to be getting out their pitchforks and, Wes, what are you thinking? This thing is amazing. This is the Hulk book I always wanted. And when I hear that, I'm going to be like, perhaps you didn't want a Hulk book in the first place. I don't know. My mind can definitely be changed, but it's a take. So I do recommend it. Let's talk through this. Normally I get a better understanding of how I feel about the book when I do these reviews anyway, because I just don't know how I feel about it completely right now. Maybe it's a highly recommend. At a minimum, it is going to be a recommend. So let's get into this. We'll break it down by art, characterization, plot, and then I'll talk a little bit about the finale, which is certainly it's a cliffhanger. It's a weird one. So let's talk about the art first. As I mentioned before, we've got Ryan Ottley doing the pencils and inks, and we've got Frank Martin with the colors. When the Hulk is smashing, when the Hulk is breaking things apart, this thing looks great, actually. I mean, this new Hulk armor is nuts looking. You could tell that Ryan Ottley and Donny Cates put a lot of thought into it. He certainly looks to be very formidable. And this is not the Hulk you've ever read before. This is a completely different interpretation. It is taking some things that have been established, tweaking them, basically putting them on their heads and presenting a new Hulk. That's why you get this look here. So I do think this comic book, as far as the art, is very successful when Hulk is smashing things, maybe ripping arms off and things like that. When it's less successful, I think, are when you actually get some character moments. The face on Bruce Banner does not look like Bruce Banner. Not in one panel would you see Bruce Banner in this book. Does it look like Bruce Banner? Also, a lot of the expressions are a little bit off. I imagine Ryan Ottley had a lot of time to work on this. He certainly completed his Spider-Man work a long time ago. So maybe he just doesn't have the world's greatest expression. So he could certainly stand to use a little bit of work on that as far as the close-ups and some of the character moments when we're talking about the humans. But when he's got the monsters, when he's got the mayhem, this thing absolutely sings. It looks like $1 million. And certainly having Frank Martin coloring your comic book will make it look even better. So the art is good. It could be better. I would give it like a 4.5 star. You know, this is really good art. Now, getting into the characterization, obviously, this is the biggest potential problem with this entire book. Now, we've certainly known in the past, and that was explored in great depths during Peter David's Hulk run, and then again in Immortal Hulk by Al Ewing, which this is following up on, that Bruce Banner has multiple personalities. There are different versions of the Hulk that Bruce Banner is dealing with. Obviously, we've had the Devil Hulk or the Monster Hulk for quite some time, but Gray Hulk, Joe Fixit, all those characters were kind of living inside of him as well. So what this has done is reconfigured the way that Bruce and the Hulk are interacting and who's in control when. Obviously, this is a spoiler review. If you didn't want to hear this, this wouldn't have been the one to to come watch before you read the comic book. But this is the way it works now, and it's explained in detail by Doctor Strange, who has visited Bruce Banner in his astral form and saw something that he could not believe existed. He didn't think, he said the amount of magic it would have taken to actually complete what Bruce Banner is doing here, he doesn't have. I don't know how he was able to achieve this. So apparently Bruce Banner has gone mad. We kind of always knew that. Obviously, he has multiple personalities. But he is apparently more evil than the Hulk persona now. So what he has done is physically, it is always Hulk. And Bruce Banner is using the Hulk. They're calling it Starship Hulk. He's essentially the captaining. He's the captain in charge of Hulk. As in, he's the mind that is controlling the ship when in this Hulk form, which he does not revert back to anymore. I would call it a drone, whatever. He wants to use the word starship. So the psyche of Bruce Banner is now controlling and piloting the monstrous Hulk. Now, we do know that Hulk is fueled by rage. That rage does not come from the psyche of Bruce Banner himself. It comes from a different personality, and what he has done is he has taken the Hulk psyche that would normally enrage and power this monster and trapped him in a room inside of his mind, and he's keeping him captured. And when he needs him to get angry and power up and become more powerful to execute the plans of Bruce Banner, he hits the throttle and I don't know, things start attacking the Hulk, at least in his mind, and he gets more and more angry. And then in the real world, the Hulk that he's piloting gets more and more powerful. And when you see the Hulk speaking, as you can see in this panel right here, the words are actually coming out of Bruce Banner in his mind. Like, he's the one speaking for the Hulk. The Hulk, as far as a physical entity, is just being driven by Banner. And Banner apparently is very unhappy. He wants to destroy everything, and he has gone absolutely insane. So now he is more devious and destructive than Hulk himself. If Bruce Banner is not the hero that is afflicted with this monster inside of him, if he is the personality fueling the monster to do even more heinous things than he was before, is this a Hulk book? I ask you that. Can this officially be a Hulk comic book? This is a drastically different take on the character. It is, this is a status quo change. This is a completely different interpretation and presentation of the character. Now, I can go back and I can read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, where he completely changed what the Swamp Thing represented, how it worked. He changed everything when he came on board. But Swamp Thing had only been in print, a few years. I don't think it had even reached 30 issues yet when Alan Moore took over. Hulk has been in print for a very long time. We're well over 700 issues of the Hulk and what Bruce Banner is and what he represents. So you are kind of boxed in when you get a book like this onto what the character represents and how it operates. You can mess with the mechanisms, but you can't break them. Does this break the character? That's my question. I have not come to my conclusion yet. And I do want to point out, I'm a big fan of Donny Cates. I really am. Generally speaking, I read all of his comic books, especially at the big two, and I certainly recommend a high amount of them. As I can see Donny Cates becoming more and more popular and selling more and more comic books, and you can see the reins from the editorial staff coming looser and looser and him essentially getting to drive the ship. This is going to sound weird, but, hey, I'm here to give my honest opinion. I do think in the end, Donny Cates might be too creative for a long-term run at DC or Marvel. When you're working at DC and Marvel, if you're working on these characters, you really are boxed in by mechanisms that have been built over time. They're kind of fixed by personality traits, by principles, morals shared by these characters that you really can't break. I think he may be too creative. People do not like restrictions. And that's why I think as we're getting his takes on all these different characters, they're deviating farther and farther away from the original characters as he's going along, and he's breaking them, because I don't think he likes being constricted by the box of what the character represents or whatever in the history of the character. And I think ultimately this could end up being his downfall. You can only do this to so many characters, one, before it gets old, and two, before people just kind of start turning on you and say, can you stop breaking all these things that we've enjoyed for so many years? He's definitely not there yet, and I think people are going to enjoy this take on Hulk, at least initially. But I do think if this is the future of the character for any long-term run with Donny Cates, this will ultimately backfire. That's my prediction. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now let's get into the plot. The plot is interesting. We have Hulk is trying to break into a compound in El Paso. We've got essentially Doctor Strange, Spider-Man. We got the other Avengers, T'Challa's there, Thor, and they're talking about what has happened to Bruce Banner. They keep talking about this incident that's happening in El Paso and that nobody knows about. And then that's when he explains how the new Hulk works. That essentially Bruce Banner is driving the Hulk, and he's kind of separated into three different distinct entities within Hulk. You have physical Hulk, the being, you have the psyche of Bruce Banner driving the Hulk, and then you have the psyche of Hulk captured, imprisoned, and that's being tortured to make the physical entity of Hulk more angry. So we got all that explained, and then we finally see what's happening, and it's basically Tony in his Hulkbuster armor fighting Hulk tooth and nail, and it's quite exciting. There's some grotesque stuff. Tony comes up with some very ingenious ways to counter Hulk. Hulk thinks he's got the upper hand. It's not Hulk that thinks it. It's Bruce Banner that thinks he's got the upper hand multiple times, only to find out that is not exactly the case. It's quite exciting. Like I said, Tony's got some tricks. It's a good battle. But when we finally see what it is, he's going after that weird cosmic Iron Man armor that Tony made during King in Black. Obviously, Donny Cates would have written that, perhaps seeding or planting the seeds for doing this in the future. And apparently what Tony was going to use that armor for was to transport people off of Earth if they were unable to overcome the King in Black and his symbiote army and find a sanctuary for them somewhere else in the galaxy. So what Hulk wants to do, and I don't know why they're trying to stop him. Apparently he wants to kill everybody. They're completely afraid of him, but they don't want him to go into this and go to another dimension, which they admit might kill you. At this point, why wouldn't you want him dead? I do think there's some elements of this entire story that if you think about them too hard, it falls apart like a house of cards. So we'll get in the final seed, and this is what Bruce Banner, and you can see his face here. He does not look like Bruce Banner. This is what he has to say to everybody as he's passing through the dimension created by this cosmic symbiote Iron Man suit that's absolutely gigantic. If you can hear this message, then I am already God. I am broadcasting this not to explain myself, but as a warning. I'm leaving not because I hate you, not because I'm scared of you. I'm leaving because none of you will know how to deal with what I'm going to become. You all have your own little plans, your armored suits, your rocket ships, all of your clever ideas of how to deal with my monster should his actions not prove to be in your best interest. But you aren't dealing with him anymore. You're dealing with me, and I promise you have no plan for me because I am not controlled by my rage anymore. I'm fueled by it. And that is the big warning that goes out from Bruce Banner, and that is the cliffhanger ending of the Smashtronaut as this new Hulk that is piloted by Bruce Banner's apparently his psyche that is no longer a good guy, no longer wants to save the world. He wants to destroy everything as he goes off into the cosmos to become a more powerful being. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? I'm giving this a tepid recommend. The art's good. There's nothing inherently wrong with the writing. I just think the concept behind it is poor. I don't think this is a Hulk book. And if this is the direction, I don't see how this works for the character. This is not a hero. Who's the hero here? Bruce Banner's not a hero. This is supposed to be a superhero comic. Hulk is not a hero. Is Hulk going to ultimately, the psyche of Hulk going to prove out end up proving to be the hero character. I understand you want the juxtaposition, or you want to put the, this monster story over on its head, but you're just not writing a Hulk comic book anymore, right? You're not writing Hulk. You're writing something else. And it says there right on the cover. What does it say? It says, "What if the Hulk exists to protect us from Bruce Banner?" Why not create this as a what if comic book? Apparently, you put it right on the cover. That's what this is. This is Elseworlds. Why even put this in continuity? Because you're breaking the character. How much is he going to break it? How much will people accept it? I'm not really sure. What did you guys think about Hulk #1? I imagine a lot of people are going to see the big concept and go, "Oh, that's really neat," because I've never seen it before, without really considering what Donny Cates is actually doing to the character within the 616 in the Marvel Universe. I think this is more destructive than positive, just as far as what we're seeing. Now, obviously, I have not read past this. By issue 4, maybe everything's changed, or maybe it's explained better. But I think as of right here, we don't know what's going to happen, but I don't know that this is a Hulk book. That's all I can say over and over and over. Why not just make this story at Image Comics or Boom or somewhere else? You can keep the IP, and you can tell this weird story where the monster that everyone thinks is the big destructive monster is actually the good guy, and it's the human that's powering him in his mind that's actually evil. That could be a cool concept, but it's just not Hulk, in my opinion.